Hello, Dr. Liddell and classmates. My name is JParish. The topic I'll cover in this presentation is legal aspects of livestock fencing in the United States. So let's get started. One of the reasons that I chose this topic is because I have personal experience with it. Growing up, my family raised horses. One evening while we were away from home, a drunk driver ran through one of our perimeter fences. We had some horses that escaped through that hole in the fence, got out on the highway, and another vehicle actually struck and killed one of the horses. And the occupants of that vehicle in that accident were injured as well, and obviously there was damage to their vehicle, so it was definitely a very serious and tragic event, and it was something that made me interested in this topic. Also, I work closely with livestock producers on a daily basis, so having the latest information, accurate information for producers, I felt like this was a topic that would help me to be better prepared to visit with them and give them good information. So first we've got to start by talking about the purpose of a fence. And really there are two things a fence does. It keeps things in and it keeps things out. So what we're trying to keep in when we talk about livestock fencing are animals. We're trying to do that for their protection and also for good management of those livestock. We can do a better job managing their health and nutrition and other things by having them confined in some situations. And on the protection side, it's not just about keeping them off the roads, but keeping them out of poisonous plants and other things that are out of our control, maybe even away from predators. You can see in the Gary Larson Far Side comic on this slide the electric fencing that's used to contain this little calf. And so there are a lot of different types of fencing that can be used in livestock production. From the other side of the equation, keeping things out, we want to protect against loose livestock that might cause injuries and also might cause property damage. So we'll start by talking about the common law for livestock trespass. It imposes strict liability on the livestock possessor, and it really doesn't matter if they're at fault or not. If the livestock are out roaming, trespassing, even if they're not causing damage, there's an issue under the common law. There's not a duty under common law for adjoining landowners to erect a fence. So if you have a farmer who wants to protect their crops, they don't have to do it under the common law. It's really the livestock possessor that needs to do that. And you notice I keep saying possessor, not owner of animals, and that's a key distinction here under the common law. The liability is with the animal possessor. The animal owner or possessor must warn others about dangerous animals. Occasionally you'll get an excitable animal, so it's really important that we let other people know that those animals need to be handled with care. Interestingly, there's no duty to keep animals off the roads under the common law, and this makes sense when you think about it because the common law was developed over centuries, and you look at the transportation back when they had open range conditions. Buckboards didn't move near as fast as vehicles traveling up and down the interstate highways today, and you had animals that were moved on trail drives, so really just different circumstances. And that's the case here with not having a duty to keep off roads under the common law. Today's a different scenario. We have a lot of public roads that are right adjacent to animal facilities where you have fences on private land that are, if they were breached, animals could easily get onto the public roads. In the state of Mississippi alone, we have livestock in all 82 counties. Livestock are widely dispersed throughout the United States. So this is an issue not just in rural areas, but in many areas throughout the United States. There are two different approaches to fence law. You've got the fence out approach and you've got the fence in approach. With the fence out approach, the burden of fencing is really on the property owner who's wanting to keep the roaming livestock out. So in the case of a farmer who doesn't want livestock to come in and eat their corn, they put up fences and they've got the burden of the cost of that fencing. This was the case under open range. It's oftentimes referred to as fence law. Then we have the other extreme. We have fence in, and this is where the rancher is responsible for damage done by livestock to the property of others, like the common law we just visited about. Closed range is another term for this, and other people will refer to this as stock law. If you hear someone say that's a stock law county, what they're really referring to is that it's a county that abides by fence-in law. A lawful fence can take many different forms, and you can make a fence out of just about anything. You can see the tires in this picture. The key here is strict enforcement for the whole fence. So a lawful fence, it can be great for most of the fence, meeting all the specs for a lawful fence, but if you have one small segment that doesn't meet the specs for a lawful fence, it's not a lawful fence. It only takes one little hole for livestock to escape. And this has really varied from state to state, and over time you can see that in Missouri in 1808, the definition of a lawful fence was just that it's non-defective. So that's pretty generic. In Iowa, it was defined as strong enough to turn cattle away, and that could even include a hedgerow, just as long as it was strong enough to turn away cattle. In California in the early 1900s, it was a little more specifically defined. Here it says at least 3 strands of tightly stretched barbed wire affixed with staples to posts no more than 16.5 feet apart. So that gets pretty specific, and of course some of this changed over time. Actually, going back to Iowa, they later changed to 4 strands of barbed wire, and in Kansas they took a little different approach. A lawful fence was really defined by an independent third party who didn't have a dog in the hunt. These people were fence viewers that would go and look at a fence and determine whether it was lawful or not. So you can see this could be a pretty contentious issue, and people took sides. And a lot of times the way it fell out, the farmers, the merchants and business people in the urban areas, and the railroads would push for the fence-in laws, whereas the ranchers, the people who didn't own land but maybe were tenants, would push for the open range conditions. And it really got heated and emotional. A lot of times people go and destroy fences. They would cut wire, they would burn posts, they would tangle barbed wire. In some cases, they would even kill livestock. And then there were people who really tried to take advantage of the laws as well. People would do what was called salting the railroad tracks, and they would place salt on the tracks where livestock would be attracted to the tracks. They would stand there on the railroad tracks eating the salt. A train would come by, hit the animals, and then the person would sue the railroad company for damages. So some people did some things that really weren't very nice. But social pressure did play a role as well. You can see in this picture the nice white fence. It really doesn't serve a purpose other than showing your neighbors that it's a nice place. So from an economic standpoint, maybe doesn't make sense, but from a social standpoint, you might want to put up a nice white fence. So when we think about social pressure, being seen as neighborly is important to people. So to be seen as neighborly, you want to report loose animals in a timely manner. From the livestock possessor standpoint, you want to corral your animals quickly. Even if you're not the one who owns or possesses the animals, just pitching in and helping rounding those animals up can be the neighborly thing to do. If the damages aren't very severe, you may want to not pursue damages, not go after legal action in that case, and just say, hey, it's all right, you know, it's understandable, it happens, as long as it's not a repeat offender. If you are the person whose livestock escaped, apologizing to the party who's had the land that the livestock came onto would be something that would definitely be worthwhile. And we still have to think about the legal framework, because there are going to be cases where there are accidents, things beyond your control. There are going to be people who are deviants in society who do things that they really shouldn't do, who repeatedly let their livestock out intentionally, or are always looking to sue someone, looking for the slightest little excuse. So you have some extremes there that the legal framework can address. The range was eventually closed. The days of the Wild West and the open range are definitely long gone. And there's several reasons for this. Economics was really a big one. With the introduction of barbed wire, fences could go up very rapidly and cost effectively. There have been a lot of changes in land use demands. You just think about recreational uses today. A lot of changes there. Livestock husbandry technology, here what we're talking about is just better production technologies that you have to have animals under your control and better confinement. Even things like rotational grazing, making better use of the land, animal health techniques, vaccinations, having those animals up where you can and attend to them, that's important. So there are advantages even to the livestock producers for closing the range. There are societal reasons as well. Certainly some environmental concerns, keeping animals out of certain watersheds and other environmentally sensitive places. And as we mentioned previously, public safety is another compelling argument for closing the range. You can see in these pictures from the livestock producer standpoint, controlling the breeding program, controlling the diet of those animals, having those animals up close where you can inspect them for health reasons, having control over the allocation of forage. These are all benefits to the livestock producers economically and allowing them to just be better stewards of their animals as well. In terms of enforcement, animal control officers are sometimes the people who are involved in this. There was a good story from a California animal control officer who said that he doesn't go after strict enforcement of the law. What he does is takes an approach where he's really trying to educate the people he deals with. He said a lot of people don't even know whether their property is open or closed range. So what he tries to do is when an animal escapes, quickly notify the owner, go ahead and get those animals rounded up, try and mediate any differences or disputes between different sides and educate them. And when you get some of those people that are repeat offenders, giving them some pretty stern warnings, and again trying to educate people. In some cases you're going to get into litigation, and certainly there are plenty of examples across a number of states for that. In terms of responsibilities, the landowners and the livestock owners definitely have responsibilities. Some of it goes back to fence establishment. Should the rancher put up the fence and maintain the fence? Should there be some type of a cost sharing arrangement if it's a fence that's shared between two adjacent property owners? There are laws that address both of these issues. Maintaining the fence is very important. Fences don't last forever. You can see in this picture this fence is definitely worn. You can see the animal going after the grass on the other side, and something that really you've got to keep on top of to make sure those fences are effective. Occasionally you're going to have something that's beyond your control, maybe a storm that knocks a limb down onto the fence. I think back to Hurricane Katrina here in Mississippi, a lot of fences that were downed all over the place, a lot of them near public highways. So sometimes things happen and it's really important to go ahead and get on top of that quickly. Even things like just closing a gate. You may have a great fence, has good integrity, but as long as the gate's open or not properly latched, that's an opportunity for animals to escape. So just close observations and making sure that the fence is good at all times throughout the year. You can see here some people will just try and patch up an old fence by putting an electric offset where animals can't rub on the old rusty barbed wire, and this is not really a great solution here. And you can see in this case the vegetation's actually grown up around the electric offset, so probably not a real effective approach. So it's real important that we take a good look at maintenance and try and do the proper thing here. In conclusion, from the rancher standpoint and the landowner standpoint, it's important to know your rights and obligations under the law. This can be confusing because different jurisdictions, not just at the state level, but even the county and the local levels can differ. But in general, there's typically a reasonable care standard that's applied. It's important to understand the seriousness of roaming livestock as evidenced by the initial story about animals getting out to the highway. It can result in injuries and fatalities and property damage that can be pretty serious economically. Ultimately, it's really about being a good neighbor and trying to do the right thing. You see the quote here from the poem Mending Wall by Robert Frost, "Good fences make good neighbors." I'd add to that really being a good neighbor involves a lot more things than just keeping a good fence. It really involves doing things like notifying people when animals are out, trying to help round them up, and just really being diligent and watching for problems. The references I used included law reviews. You can see some of the web links here. Also included referee journal articles, books, and government websites. I hope that you enjoyed this presentation and learned something from it. I definitely did, and at this time I'd be happy to entertain any questions. Thank you.